Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for yet another extremely timely, topical, and riveting EMET webinar. In less than 3 weeks, the members of Israel's parliament, the Knesset, will be voting on whether or not to extend Israeli sovereignty over 30% of Judea and Samaria and the Jordan Valley. This amounts to a rather momentous historic decision and a break from previous peace plans. And it is actually in keeping with the peace process of the current US administration. Here to discuss this with you today are two preeminent scholars and thinkers. Dan Diker, who is the Foreign Policy Fellow and Senior Project Director at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, where he heads the program to counter political warfare and BDS. He's editor and co-author of JCPA's latest volume, Israelophobia and the West. He's also authored numerous books on the global BDS campaign, including The Pakba Deception Unmasked in 2019, Defeating Denormalization in 2018, Students for Justice in Palestine Unmasked in 2017 and in 2018, and BDS Unmasked, Radical Roots, Extremist Ends in 2016. Dan is also a research fellow at the International Institute for Counterterrorism, IDC Herzliya, and previously served as Secretary General of the World Jewish Congress. Dan received a BA cum laude from Harvard and an MA in Government and Counterterrorism Policy, summa cum laude, from the Interdisciplinary Center of Herzliya. He's currently writing his doctoral dissertation on the Palestinian national movement's ideology and political strategy, 1964 to the present. He's married with 5 children and immigrated to Israel in 1990. And we are also profoundly honored to have Brigadier-General Yossi Kuperwasser with us this afternoon. Yossi is the Senior Manager of the Project on Regional Affairs at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. He was the Israeli Intelligence Attaché to the United States, the Chief Intelligence Officer of the IDF Central Command, and head of the Research Division of Israel's Defense Intelligence Directorate between 2001 and 2006. Later, he served as the Director General of the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs. Yossi is an expert on Israel's security issues, and he regularly publishes articles on various media outlets and professional journals. He's also the head of the Institute for the Research and the Methodology of Intelligence at the Israeli Intelligence Community Commemoration Center. It is an esteemed honor to have both of these deep analysts and profound thinkers with us today. Dan Diker, why don't you lead us today in our important discussion?
Thank you, Sarah. Boy, this is really a treat to be involved with EMET, even though it's across the waters. The last time I think we saw one another a number of months ago before all of this pandemic craziness started. We were in Washington, and it's really always terrific to be with you. It's also for me, a real honor always to be on the platform with my dear friend, colleague, and teacher, General Kuperwasser, who's really one of Israel's leading experts on the Palestinians and on national security and military issues. So we have a real treat in store for us because we can really dig down deep in Cooper's analysis on the security aspect of what we're facing today. I'm just going to try to set the stage with a number of points about the political and diplomatic and overall strategic envelope or context of what we're facing here. We have, when the plan was announced, it really was the first time in about 6 US mediated assisted peace plans that one saw a large national consensus in Israel accepting the plan, being amenable to this plan. I'm talking about from the center left to the political center to the center right. And for the first time, you have a substantial amount of support, even from prominent sectors of what has been known the settler community for this plan. Because what this plan does is it reflects that the United States government has done a serious amount of homework. They spent 2 years traveling throughout the Middle East with every substantial Arab country, with Israel, studying where past plans have to an extent, gone right and where they've gone wrong. And what the administration has done very well is to understand that there has been a disconnect in past plans between what the Israeli public has been and the Israeli security echelons and political echelons have been able to countenance in terms of the high risk involved with the establishment of an independent Palestinian entity, especially one that overlooks, by definition, Ben Gurion Airport and looks westward towards Israel's major population center. And what this American government has recognized is that Israel has always, since 1967, required, since the days of Yigal Allon and Yitzhak Rabin, and all labor leaders since 1967 have backed a concept called defensible borders for Israel, which means that Israel, no matter what future diplomatic arrangement is held, first going back 52 years or 53 years between Israel and its Arab neighbors, and then that relationship acutely became compacted into what would happen between Israel and the Palestinians, because the Palestinians became the bilateral negotiating partner of Israel beginning in 1993. And the idea among all Israeli governments since 1967 is that Israel would have to control or apply Israeli sovereignty to the Jordan Rift Valley, meaning the Jordan Valley, the northern Dead Sea area, and all the way up to the Judea and Samaria Hill Ridge that dominates Ben Gurion Airport and the West. As a matter of fact, we could just have a quick visual just to give you a visual sense of what that means. That can be the map. We have that map just for a second. Yeah, if you see, all Israeli governments in '67 have said that Israel is going to have to control the Jordan Rift valleys. You can see that overlooks this very narrow 9 miles at its narrowest point, the Israeli very narrow waistline that has a commanding view over the vast majority of Israel's population to the west. So that's been a national security consensus, which General Kuperwasser will go into much greater detail than I was. I just wanted to mention that as a context, that the American administration did its security homework and understood the very broad national security consensus around this idea of the Jordan Valley up to the Hill Ridge. It is, by the way, a political point in terms of the wide popularity of this initiative, even though it does involve the creation of an independent Palestinian entity in 70% of the West Bank, is that you have 4 factions in the opposition beyond the coalition, the opposition that support this plan conceptually, and so there's very broad support for the idea that Israel would apply its civilian law and ultimately sovereignty over the Jordan Valley, Rift Valley, and Israeli, as well as Israeli Jewish communities in the West Bank. There are 450,000 Israelis that live east of the 67 lines. And this is the second point where the administration did its homework. There has been a fundamental disconnect since 1993, Sarah, and everyone else, over this idea that the Palestinians deserve legitimate rights and Israel deserves at most security in order to allow Palestinians to realize their legitimate rights. So there's been an asymmetry between what people understand to be the need for Israel to make far-reaching concessions in order to enable the Palestinians to recognize what they call their legitimate rights. And what has happened is, ironically, that Israel's legitimacy in the context of the past failed 6 peace processes since 2000. I'm talking about 2000, the Taba in 2001, the Israel's unilateral disengagement of the Gaza Strip and the possibility of creating a startup Palestinian nation in 2005 in Gaza and extending to parts of the West Bank, talking about the Palestinian refusal of the Kerry plan of Annapolis in 2008, which was almost 100% offer by Prime Minister Olmert, the 2014 Kerry plan, and now the Palestinian Authority decision to boycott or to BDS the American administration, Israel, and, by the way, most of the Arab countries in the Arab League that sponsored or co-sponsors of the Bahrain-Manama $50 billion startup nation plan for the Palestinian Authority. So the idea had always been that the Palestinians would determine their, what they call their legitimate rights, and that Israel at best would be offered certain security arrangements that would help the Palestinians satisfy those rights. Fast forward to 2020. The American administration recognized that back in November of 19, that Israeli communities east of 67 are based on what every Israeli government has recognized its legitimate historical and legal rights to be, meaning living in Tel Aviv is the same thing as living in Efrat, Gush Etzion, or in the northern Samaria region, or in the Jordan Valley. And all of that, and this is a very important point, is based on 1917 Balfour Declaration, the 1920 San Remo Conference, and then in 1922, the 51 principal members of the League of Nations unanimously voted to affirm the right of the Jewish people to, and this is the verb, reconstitute their national home in the geographical area of Palestine. Every single Israeli government since 1948 has based its understanding and its legal system on the affirmation of the international community's, or the international community's affirmation of the Jewish people's right to reconstitute its home west of the Jordan River. This United States government formally recognized what every Israeli government since 1948 had recognized, and to be self-critical for a moment, it has not been a much spoken about dialogue or discourse in Israel, meaning Israel's rights. It was always understood within the Israeli discourse what its rights are. We got all caught up, as people know, in the political aspect of whether to operationalize rights that everyone agreed Israel has. Now, this might come as news to some of you watching this program because of the wildly politicized discourse over Israeli settlement building in Judea and Samaria. And there always has been a wide agreement in Israel that the settlement blocks are of national consensus, but the fundamental right of Israel to build housing starts west of the Jordan River has been a standard idea in Israel, and now the US administration has recognized that legitimate right. So now you have a symmetry, Sarah and everybody, you have a symmetry between Palestinian claims and rights and Israeli Jewish claims and rights from a legal point of view as far as the American administration is concerned. So here you have Israel's national security rights, its consensus around the concept of defensible borders. And as we go back, let's recognize that what this plan is not the settler plan. It's actually the operationalization of Rabin's vision, of Yitzhak Rabin's vision, who may be one of the most popular Israeli leaders in the history of Washington, certainly in the last 50 years. And what Rabin's chief of staff at the time said, Shimon Sheves, at the end of January 2020, he said, oh, this is the update of the Rabin vision, because the Rabin vision at Oslo was that the Palestinians would not in the end have a full-blown sovereign Palestinian state that could threaten Israel, but that they actually could become the Hong Kong of the Middle East. They would be less than a state and more than autonomy. Those are the words of former Prime Minister Rabin. Former Prime Minister Rabin said Israel would remain united, Jerusalem would remain united to Israel's undivided capital, and that Israel's eastern security border would be the Jordan Valley. So here you have you basically have an operationalization, a mobilization of the Rabin vision. And that vision was shared by every labor leader since 1967. Golda, in 1967, Golda and Rabin in his first administration, and then in his second administration beginning in 1992. And so this is not a right-wing plan. This is an Israeli national security consensus plan. The third idea, before I wind up and hand it over to Cooper, is that this is a moment of truth, as the title of today's discussion is, for the Palestinians, because it offers the Palestinians the possibility of being a startup nation. With a $50 billion development budget, it can certainly be either the Macau or the Hong Kong of the Middle East, without question, without being cynical, 100% genuine. However, it requires, for the first time, that the Palestinians step up to the plate and behave the way a democratic Western nation state would behave, which means disarm the Hamas, disarm the Iranian-backed Palestinian Islamic Jihad and the Hamas in Gaza. It means demilitarize the Palestinian future sovereign entity. It means allow Israel to have overall security, national security, and military responsibility opposite our Jordanian neighbors west of the Jordan River. It means recognizing Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people. It means stopping payment for and incentivizing terrorism in the Palestinian entity. And it means stop inciting to terror. This is something that Cooper, frankly, has led Israel's agenda when he was the director of the Strategic Affairs Ministry in monitoring and calling out the Palestinian Authority on terrible Nazi-themed anti-Semitic discourse, which has radicalized generations of Palestinians and made it very difficult for the Palestinians to make any compromises because of that radicalized discourse. So it really requires the Palestinians to step up to the plate with tremendous benefits. It's a viable Palestinian state in 70% of the territory in the West Bank. Let's be very clear. Israel has already conceded 40% of the former Jordanian controlled and formerly annexed West Bank. And so we're only talking about the remaining 60%. So the idea of the administration is to split that 60% in two, which means 30% to Israel and the other half to the Palestinian Authority, which would accrue to a total of 70%. Now, it's also a moment of truth for the Mideast and the West, because people who follow the Middle East know that the administration has done its homework and traveled to major Arab powers such as the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Gulfies, and there is a quiet support for this plan there because their major threat assessment is on Iran. And of course, Cooper is one of the leading experts in Israel on that file as well, and he will go into that. But that they need the Palestinian issue to be stabilized and approached as a solution in order to allow them to more publicly work with Israel in order to stabilize the Middle East from the Iranian race for regional supremacy, nuclear supremacy, and to stop their subversion of every single country in the Middle East and their attempt to attack Israel. And they're on 3 of our borders. So that's the regional context, is that we have the Iranian regime on 3 borders. So any country such as Israel, which is between the size of New Jersey and the size of Maryland-Delaware, could take an additional risk and put what is called a self-declared adversarial country in the middle of Israel is a very high-risk proposition. So we have a regional context that's subversive by Iran. We have a local context in which we have a very difficult partner to deal with, but Israelis are prepared to make concessions, but to allow the establishment of a state or a sovereign entity that will not threaten Israel's existence, but will work with Israel, and hopefully, as we move to stabilize a very unstable Middle East, Israel has been understood by our Arab neighbors as a solution to the Middle East problems, not as the cause of the Middle East problem. So that the Trump administration has done a very good job in understanding how to add to this or to enhance the stability of the Middle East, even in this very high-risk situation of adding a Palestinian sovereign state in the middle of all of this instability, as opposed to further destabilizing a region that needs so much help in stabilizing and normalizing its life for the several hundred million people that live here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Before we have the honor of turning the mic over to Yossi Kuperwasser, I just want to say that I had the supreme honor of being in the White House in January of this year when this new plan was revealed, and sitting right in front of me were the ambassadors from Amman and from the United Arab Emirates, which is quite amazing. So without further ado, Brigadier-General Yossi Kuperwasser, please.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Dan, for your warm remarks. And good evening, or actually good noon to everybody there. I'll try to touch on several points really briefly, because I see there are already questions coming. So first of all, I would like to say something about the way people speak about the terminology used in order to describe what we are considering of making, of doing in the coming couple of weeks. Because we here are very cautious and we say that we are talking about the application of Israeli law and sovereignty over parts of Judea and Samaria and the Jordan Valley. But most people use the term annexation, which is, by using this term, they already paint this move as an illegal one, because annexation is illegal. According to international law, you're not allowed to take, even if you were attacked and you won a war because you protected yourself and defended yourself, still you're not allowed to take part of the enemy's territory and take it and turn it into a part of your territory. So annexation is illegal. But what we are doing, and the Americans understand it, is that we apply the law, the Israeli law and sovereignty, to parts of our homeland. That was historically our homeland, and its existence as historically as our homeland was recognized by the international community back in San Remo and in Lucerne in 1920, 1922, and then referred to the use of the term reconstitution in this respect. And this has never changed. So we are not doing anything illegal. That's the first thing that has to be clear. We are not doing anything illegal. Now, why haven't we done it until now? That's a big question. We could have done it. We were in charge of this territory since for 53 years. Why haven't we done it? Because of two things. First, we were offering lands for peace. That was our approach. We said to the Palestinians and also to the Egyptians, which we were doing that successfully with them, but we also said to the Palestinians and to Jordanians in the first place, and later on to the Palestinians, listen, you can take some land if you make peace with us. Unfortunately, this didn't succeed. The Palestinians don't want the land. The Palestinians want the land only as a jumping board to having the rest of the territory. They are not ready to have an Israeli or Jewish nation state and any piece of what they call Palestine and we call it Israel. And that is the reason why we couldn't make a peace agreement with them. But we were waiting, and all these efforts that Dan mentioned, the 6 peace proposals and the many efforts that were done in this context even beforehand, all failed because of the Palestinian intransigence and refusal to accept the idea that there's going to be one of these states that's going to be there is going to be the nation state of the Jewish people. That's something that is unacceptable for them. And the second reason we didn't do it is that we never had international support for doing it, not even American support. And you can hear all the people that were representing America throughout those 53 years, how they are so afraid of we doing that right now, and are trying to put pressure on us not to do it, because this will mean that they were misleading us for 53 years, telling us that we have to give up, telling us that we have to make all kinds of concessions that would put Israel in a terrible danger for its security. They were proposing that again and again and again. This is called the two-state solution, in which, as Olmert was ready to do, Israel will give up the Jordan Valley, which we already know how dangerous it is, because we all can look at what happened in Gaza. We gave up the Philadelphia corridor, and Gaza turned into an arsenal of weapons that were used against us and hit Tel Aviv and almost reached Haifa. So this is crazy if we would allow this piece of land that is ours to be under the control of our enemies that want to go back to Haifa and Jaffa. So it's this is why these people, this cottage peace industry, are so much against this proposal of President Trump, because it means that they have wasted the time on proposals that would put Israel in terrible danger. And now we have an administration in Washington that understands that this is not the case, that Israel has to be able to defend itself by itself and has to, for that purpose, be in control of the Jordan Valley. And Jordan Valley is a part of Israel, of the Jewish people territory. So there's no judicial problem, there's no legal problem, and we can move on with that. This is a totally different approach. If we do not use this opportunity, we are very stupid. It's I hope we shall not make this mistake. It's now going back to the plan. There are 4 things in this plan that are significantly different from previous plans, and Dan touched upon some of them. I want to touch on the 4 elements. First and foremost, the most important thing, and this goes back to the issue of applying the law. This plan, unlike any of its previous ones, says that the Palestinians will not have a veto power on moving forward with the peace process. It's until now, we never managed to move forward anywhere because always it was agreed that nothing will be agreed upon until everything is agreed upon, and until Palestinians agree on everything. And because of that, we never made any progress. So this is for the first time that the American administration comes up with a plan that says no veto power for the Palestinians. Some things that are to be done anyhow can be done without waiting for the Palestinians, like applying the Israeli law for the Jordan Valley and for the settlements. And some other things we shall wait some time for the Palestinians, but if they don't come to the table and they don't accept the conditions we put forward, no veto power in the future. And in 4 years, if the Palestinians don't come to the table and don't accept the conditions, Israel can extend its sovereignty over additional parts of the Judea and Samaria territory that right now are kept for a future Palestinian state. So this is a major difference from the previous situation. Secondly, for the first time, the American plan is based on the idea that Israel should have a real security plan. A plan in which Israel has the overriding security responsibility for whatever is going on in Judea and Samaria and inside the Palestinian state when and if there is a Palestinian state. Israel is going to have the overriding security responsibility. According to the no security plan of General Allen, a very dangerous plan, the responsibility was supposed to be in the hands of the Americans or the Palestinians, which would guarantee that we shall fight the Americans every fortnight, if not every day, and we shall never be able to be safe because the control of this Jordan Valley would be in the hands of the Palestinians. What do you think the Palestinians will do? They will bring in their friends from around the Arab world and try to build, because this is written in the Palestinian phases theory. The Article 8 of the Palestinian phases theory says that we shall establish a state on whatever we get and use it as a jumping board for getting the rest with the support of the Arabs. So it's already written. You don't have to be that wise and or have such a good intelligence to know what the Palestinians are going to do. And this is what was offered to us until now. Now there is a plan that says, no, the Israelis are going to be responsible. Whatever the Israelis say, when the Israelis feel comfortable with delivering the responsibility for security to the Palestinian security forces, nice, they can do it. It's up to the Israelis. There is going to be some sort of an American involvement, but a very limited one. I'm not saying that this is a perfect security plan. There are some holes in that too. For example, the fact that they offer to have a direct link between Gaza and Judea and Samaria that is not going to be under Israeli control. This is a big problem because there is no way that we can control what's happening on the Palestinian border in Gaza and Egypt. But okay, we shall have to discuss these matters. But it's like 10,000 times better than all the previous security plans that we were offering. The third big difference between this plan and the others is that this plan understands for the first time what is the reason for which we never made peace. And the reason is the Palestinian narrative. So this plan says to the Palestinians, listen, you want to have a state? Fine. It's going to be about over 70% of the Judea and Samaria and the additional areas that Israel will give you in the Negev and so on and so forth, and Gaza, of course. But before you even sit to the table, and definitely before you have a state, you have to change your narrative. You have to accept that there is a Jewish people. You have to accept that there is a historical connection between the Jews and this piece of land called Land of Israel. You have to accept that the Jews are not the worst creatures over earth, and that they should not be, they are not an apartheid state, and are not all these stupid things that you are saying. Jews are great people. Number 4, you have to give up the idea that you can use terror in order to promote your goals. So you have to stop paying salaries to terrorists. You have to stop paying salaries to terrorists even before you sit to the table. How can you expect Israel to sit to the table with you when you are paying salaries to terrorists to kill Israelis. That makes any sense. So it's all these things have to happen to stop incitement and so on and so forth. All these elements you have to accept. For example, according to the Palestinian narrative, the Palestinians are representing the Islam, and because of that, they have to control the Temple Mount. No, you don't have to control the Temple Mount. Israel makes much better job in protecting the holy places than the Muslims. And look, Israel has kept and allowed freedom of worship in in the Haram Sharif. There's no problem. It can continue to do that. It's and another element that is in your narrative that you have to give up is the idea of the return, as they call it, the right of return. No return. You should know no return will take place. It's and there's no justification for that, and there should not be any expectations of that. And eventually, the seventh and most concluding part of this narrative, that you should never accept Israel as a nation state of the Jewish people. You have to accept Israel as a nation state of the Jewish people. Otherwise, you're not going to have a state. Now, these are all the people who were behind the previous peace plans were willfully blind to that. It's not that they didn't know. They decided to ignore the fact that they knew that this narrative of the Palestinians is the major obstacle to peace. This is the first plan that says, because of that, the administration calls it a realistic plan, because really it is the one that says, here is the problem, this is the thing that we have to overcome. And this is a major change in the plan compared with previous plans. Now, we have to understand, Israel is discussing the possibility of extending its sovereignty over pieces of parts of Judea and Samaria and the Jordan Valley in the context of this plan. It's not that we are going to do that just, there are some people in the extreme right in Israel who said, let's do it and ignore the plan. No, we are going to do it in the context of the plan, because we understand that without American support, this is not going to happen. We cannot do that all by ourselves, even if we are right. That's not enough. You have to be wise as well. And this is a very critical point. So we are saying, yes, we have to finish demarcating the lines. We have to say that we support the plan, or at least our prime minister has to say that he supports the plan before we move forward. But the implementation will be in the context of the plan. And this is what guarantees this wide support in Israel, this consensus in Israel between the left or the center left and the center right on this issue, which is like 80 members of Knesset that are going to vote in favor of that. It's amazing. I can tell you that one law that I promoted about it's called the freezing law, in which Israel has decided not to take part of the money we collect for the Palestinians that is used for paying salaries to terrorists and to deduct it from the money that we deliver to the Palestinians. This law enjoyed a majority of 87 votes in the Knesset. This was really unprecedented. This move is going to have 80 votes. It's not a minor issue. And this strength, this unity strength that we have with this unity government allows us to take this kind of steps. Now, we are not underestimating the possibility of harsh Palestinian reaction, and we know that they are going to do all kinds of political activity and legal activity, and even some terror on the ground. We are used to that, and I expect that this will happen too, although the Palestinians are saying that this is not going to happen. But of my experience serving so many years with them, when they say nothing is going to happen, you know that a lot of things are going to happen. But yes, if you are going to have such an opportunity and you're doing the right thing because you need for your own security to control the Jordan Valley forever, it's extremely important that everybody knows that we shall be there forever. It is good for Jordan, and Jordanians know that. They have to say something opposite, of course, we understand. But it's the best thing for them because we protect them from the Palestinians. The Palestinians are the major threat for Jordan. So we are not a threat for Jordan. So it's good for Jordan. It's good for the Arab communities all over the place, because it will give us better strength to confront the Iranians and whatever radicals are going to try to threaten us from the east. It's good because it tells the Palestinians, listen, your cheating is exposed, you have to confront reality. This is very important. Everybody in the Arab pragmatic world wants somebody to deliver this message to the Palestinians. They are all fed up with the Palestinians. They want to be friends of Israel. They need Israel in order to protect themselves against the radicals, especially from Iran, but also from the Muslim Brotherhood and so forth. So it's a good move for the security and the stability of the Middle East in the long run. It's also a good move for the Europeans. If finally there's going to be progress on the peace process, the Europeans should hug us. Instead, no surprisingly, they don't. I'm not sure they know how to hug, and we get a cold shoulder from the Europeans, unfortunately. But we just had here the German foreign minister. I don't know what. Instead of Germany standing with the Jewish people, they stand against it. Sounds very strange. Anyhow. But it's good for our security, first and foremost, because we shall be able forever to protect ourselves and prevent ourselves from being in the situation that Dan described with this map that he said that where the Palestinians are going to be so close to the sea. And as they say, they want to control from the river to the sea. Now, the importance of the Jordan Valley is self-evident. If you just put this picture that you have, Sarah. Jordan Valley is a natural obstacle. It's extremely difficult for anybody to cross it without us while we are sitting along the border. And people say, but we have Jordan. Yes, we have Jordan, and we shall continue to have Jordan after we extend the sovereignty over the Jordan Valley. But the message is clear. We are going. Oh, here it is. You see how steep the slopes of the mountains overlooking the Jordan Valley are, and how difficult it is to climb on them, and how good it is to observe what's going on in the valley from the tops of these hills. As the former Chief Intelligence Officer of Central Command responsible for all these observation posts, I can tell you that when you sit over there, you see, I don't want to tell you exactly up where, but for very far. So any threat that will be emanating from the east will be spotted by Israel. And the important thing is that people understand we are there to stay, as the Alon plan said, and as everybody who has eyes in his head would understand that we need to control that. Just like the Golan Heights that some people wanted us to give up. God forbid, and fortunately we did. Topography also has some importance when you speak. Now, it's true, some people say, well, you know, with long-range missiles, you can reach Israel also from Jordan. Even from Iran, you can do that. Yes, but it's beyond that. There are so many other threats that you have to be able to confront, not only the long-range missiles, and we have solutions for the long-range missiles as well. That's very important. Another lie that you hear very often is that if we do that, then Israel will lose either its democratic nature or its Jewish nature, because it will have to contain and to embrace all the Palestinians living in the West Bank. This is again nonsense. We don't have any intention to rule the Palestinians in the Judea and Samaria or in the Palestinian ruled territories, and we want them. We are even ready to let them have some sort of an independence that they can call a state, which is going to be a little bit less than a state because security is going to be in our hands. But we are ready to do even that. We are, and even if they collapse now, they threaten to collapse. I don't think they're going to collapse. They keep collapsing all the time. It's they never collapse. And you know, before we moved forward with the Taylor Force Act and with the Freeze Act in Israel, everybody told me, well, they're going to collapse. They're going to collapse. I said, forget it. They're not going to collapse. They're going to stop cooperation on the security level. I said, forget it. They're not going to stop the cooperation on the security level because it's very important for them, 10 times more than it's important for us. They will continue to do that. So they shout, and they're very good at that. But we have to be realistic about what they can really do. But suppose they collapse. Okay, then we shall establish a new autonomy without the PLO. Not such a bad alternative. In many ways, it's a better alternative because the PLO is committed to the destruction of the state of Israel. That's the main goal is they fight. They keep fighting. The struggle against Zionism is their identity. And we made a deal in Oslo with a group that continued after we cut a deal with them to be committed to our destruction and annihilation. So if in the end of the day, what will happen is that this PLO gives up, and they are not going to do that. But if they give up the Palestinian Authority, dissolve the Palestinian Authority, and we shall have to find the replacement within the Palestinians, let it be. It's a problem of the Palestinians. It's not an Israeli problem. We shall not let them become Israeli citizens or anything like that. This is out of the question. And so we shall remain the Jewish democratic the nation state of the Jewish people that has a democratic rule and democratic system, and that we shall always be. This is our nature. It's our identity. And this is, I think, extremely important to understand. So what's at stake here? That's the final word. What is at stake is either to stick to the status quo that we had until now, which also has all kinds of problems, or to move from it. But if you stick to the status quo, then the Europeans will love you, the Jordanians will be calm, the Palestinians will say, oh, wonderful, and so on and so forth. By the way, it's very strange. The same people were always telling us, no, the status quo is terrible. You have to make more concessions. You have to give the Palestinians more. You have to move towards separation. You have to move to that. These are the same people. The commanders for Israel, for example, said you have to give up the status quo and give the Palestinians, carry out a unilateral withdrawal. That's what they were asking us to do. Now they say, oh, no, stick to the status quo, don't move forward. They wanted us to take unilateral steps backwards when we are making unilateral steps forward. That's not acceptable for them. This is ridiculous. We have to take in between sticking to the status quo or moving forward. I'm in favor of moving forward because we have this American support for making this move. And we should make it fast because nobody knows what's going to happen in America in November. And so we have to do it between now and November. We have to be swift. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay, there was so much there. And I do want to say first that I was actually at the Washington Institute on July 25th, 2000, the day that the Oslo Accords, the Camp David II talks broke up, and then Attorney General Eliakim Rubinstein came to address the group. And he said that there were people crying on the way to the airport because they just thought if they offered Arafat everything that he would want, he couldn't possibly say no. And you know the drill. He offered minimally 90% of Judea and Samaria or the West Bank, a right of return for 100,000 refugees, and a monetary package for those that Israel couldn't absorb, shared sovereignty of Jerusalem. And this was only topped by Ehud Olmart's offer in October of that year in Taba. What I like about this plan is that it changes the paradigm, and it doesn't reward Palestinian rejectionism and intransigence and violence. It doesn't reward bad behavior. So I feel it's remarkable, and we are at the precipice of a historic decision. But I am a little concerned about political realities in America and around the world. Unfortunately, last Thursday, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi said that this is going to change the relationship of the United States to Israel. There were 19 Democratic senators who wrote a letter saying this alters decades of American foreign policy, and I'm very worried that there might be a Democratic Senate, a Democratic House of Representatives, and a Democratic White House that does not view the world the way we do. So what are the most important messages that we could send out to our elected representatives now? Do you have any words of advice?
I think that the most important message is that this old paradigm was a very bad thing for Israel's security. And although everybody said we are committed to Israel's security, there's nothing that we care more about than Israel's security. And as they say in Arabic, la jumruk al kalam. There's no text on words. But in fact, they were not promoting Israel's security. They were putting Israel's security at risk. And it's extremely important. You just take this photo. I mean, don't they see what it means? It's just look at what happened in Gaza. We know what happens wherever we move back, even in Lebanon, but which is a little bit different story. But whenever we go back, if this is not accompanied by a real change in the Palestinian narrative, we shall just have more terror. Now here, what we have in our hands is a move that demands a change in the Palestinian narrative, but says, with all due respect to the change in the narrative, we know how narratives can change and flip back. And it's going to take like 40 years really to change the narrative. It's not enough that the leader says something. It has to be changed in the way, in the textbooks, in so many ways it has to change before we can really say people have a different narrative. So it's this move says, this plan says that while this narrative is changed, hopefully, Israel still has to control the Jordan Valley, and it's not doing anything wrong by doing that, because this is not somebody else's land, it's its land. And this is something that has to be clarified. I don't think people clarify to the Democrats or to the 19 senators who said, I don't think they know what they're talking about. It's maybe not because they have bad intentions, they just don't know what they're talking about. I think people should clarify to them everything that we were saying here. They should know that, because if they are real friends of Israel, some of them are not real friends of Israel, maybe, I don't know. But if they're not real friends of Israel, I have no expectation. But if they are friends of Israel, once they hear all these messages, I believe they will open their eyes and say, yes, I can tell you, when we were sitting, when I was in the Ministry of Strategic Affairs, or when I was in the Ministry of Defense, and we were sitting with the Americans and showing them the facts, they were horrified. When we explained to them the Palestinian narrative, they were horrified. When we spoke about incitement, they were horrified. Look, the Taylor Force Act in the US Congress passed unanimously. It's people are, when they see the facts, they are horrified, and they understand what's going on. When they understand that these people pay salaries to terrorists who are in Israeli jails because they carry out the attacks against Jews, they understand that something is wrong here. And so we have to bring the fact to these people to convince them that they should be really supporting Israeli security and not just from their lips and outs.
Okay, our screen is lit up with questions. I have to apologize if we don't get a chance to answer every question. Sarah Leia, would you like to read some of the questions?
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much to our panelists for joining us and for taking the time. And as Sarah said, we will definitely not be able to get through all the questions, but thank you so much for submitting them, and we'll answer as many as we can. So the first question we have, how can Israel extend its law to the Jordan Valley, but not extend citizenship to the Arab residents of the Jordan Valley? What country would they belong to?
Well, I'll just take a quick crack at it, and then I'll turn it over to Cooper, and he'll supplement what I'm going to say. Extending law to the Jordan Valley really means normalizing life for Israelis that live in Jewish communities. That we want the army out and we want Israeli law in. It does not include, as the Prime Minister has said, it does not include Jericho, which is part of the Palestinian Authority-controlled areas. Besides Jericho, there are few enclaves in the northern Dead Sea region in the Jordan Valley that would be considered part of the Palestinian Authority area. In other words, this is not a repetition of South Africa. People use this ridiculous, slanderous, libelous apartheid analogy, which is for those of us who were in apartheid South Africa, it's as absurd as Wonder Bread has real vitamins in it, because we have already been for 27 years in a mutually agreed upon, internationally guaranteed diplomatic process with the Palestinians, to which 9 times in a row they have said no in the final status. So that those communities of Palestinian Arabs who would not be included in the area, who would not be included in the Israeli application of law, they would be assigned, or their status would be part of the pre-state Palestinian Authority areas. That is there should be absolutely no question about that, because the word, this propaganda word apartheid has been bandied about, and it is ridiculous. Now, there has been a suggestion. I'm going to turn over to Cooper now. If there has been a suggestion that some of those enclaves that would be entitled to have some sort of economic and residence rights, the way Palestinians do in the eastern side of Jerusalem, so that this plan has not been fully implemented and fully fleshed out and fully decided. But between those two options, there's clearly a pathway towards the application of Israeli law, which, by the way, like in the Golan Heights, leaves the future available for diplomatic exchange. It doesn't mean, as Cooper said in the beginning, this is not annexation. This is already Jewish land that now has been operationalized to normalize life east of the 67 lines for Jews living in Jewish communities. Go ahead, Cooper.
Yeah, first of all, the plan is very clear on this issue. The plan says that Palestinians who live in territories that will become Israel will have direct contact, direct ability to reach the Palestinian territories, and will remain Palestinian citizens. And I don't think there's a need to change it. Anyhow, the number is really minuscule, so it's not any major problem. And by the way, the same as it's stated in the plan, the same situation is relevant to Jewish residents of Israeli settlements, right, that are going to be located in areas that by and large are going to be Palestinian, and they will have also a road connecting them with the Israeli areas. That's the situation. What can we do? It's a complicated situation. So any simple solution will not work, and you got to have a complicated solution to a complicated situation. And the plan is doing its best in this respect. As I said, we are not going to have any apartheid or any problems with being democratic and Jewish at the same time. Actually, it goes well, very well together.
Thank you so much. For our next question, it was mentioned earlier that it would really be in Jordan's best interest for Israel to extend its sovereignty over the Jordan Valley. So on that note, how seriously do either of you take the talk by many Jordanians about going to war with Israel if this were to take place?
Cooper, that's for you. Go ahead and take it.
Well, I'm definitely not going to war with Israel because they're going to lose. So it's I don't think that they think about going to war. It's they think about protesting. They have to do something to protest, not because they don't like the idea, but because they have to be seen as if they don't like the idea. And so they will do something. We know they are going to do something anyhow, because at the end of the day, the majority of the people living in Jordan are Palestinians. And definitely the majority of the holders of a Jordanian identity card. So it's something that the leadership in Jordan, the king and his entourage, have to take into account, and they have to be very cautious because the Palestinians don't like it. And nobody, let's put it this way, nobody expects the Palestinians to like it, right? Because they also want this piece of land. And the point is that we know that there is no way that Israel and the Palestinians will reach an agreement about who controls the Jordan Valley. We need it. It's ours and we need it. The Palestinians also claim that it's theirs, and they also need it, as I said, because they need to be able to have everything coming in without control, so they will be able to march forward towards Haifa. So it's there's no way that we'll reach an agreement. That's the most wise thing in what the administration did with presenting this plan. They said, okay, this thing is not ever going to be solved. So let's solve it the way you untie the Gordian knot, okay? You just cut it. Let's say this is going to be Israel and that's it. We don't need agreement about that because we shall never have an agreement. If we wait until there is agreement about the Jordan Valley, there shall never be peace. Okay, so that's the thing. And the Jordanians understand it. They know that there's not going to be an agreement on that. They want Israel to control it. They have to show that they are not happy with that. So they will call their ambassador back and they will send our ambassador. And after a year, something will happen and they will face some difficulty and they will say, okay, let's forget it and they bring back the ambassador. We have to remember also that Jordan is reliant on Israel in many other aspects. We supply them with gas. We supply them with water. They cannot live without us. So it's, I mean, gas they maybe can find somewhere else, but where the water are going to come from. So it's, they are too dependent on that, and they are also dependent. We need the security cooperation with Jordan. It's important for us, but they need it too. We are not making a favor to anybody.
There's one additional point here that I want to mention in addition to the national security and military stuff that Cooper mentioned, and that is the number one strategic objective of the Hashemite kingdom is to maintain their custodianship of the Muslim shrines in Jerusalem. And that's called the status quo. And they know that in this plan, their continued custodianship will be strengthened. Under any other plan, as in the 5 failed past plans, their custodianship was under threat. Now, we have a international diplomatic agreement with the Jordanians since 1994, and it is an absolute strategic necessity for them to maintain that. What's that, Cooper?
I said it's a peace agreement, it's not an international.
Yeah, peace agreement. Peace agreement with Jordan, signed 1994, and then that's the keystone to it. Is their custodianship of the Muslim shrines in Jerusalem, and you know that is clearly in the Middle East, in which, as the head of the Jordanian Senate told me in Amman a few years ago, you know the Shiites have Najaf and Karbala, the Saudis have Mecca and Medina, and the Hashemite kingdom has Jerusalem from an Arab Muslim point of view, and they want to keep it that way. You know, the King Abdullah II is understood to be the 43rd direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, and they want to keep it for another 200 generations and not turn it over to the Palestinian Authority.
Right. Okay. I think we should be wrapping up soon, but one final question, Sarah Leia, if you have time for one final question, and
Of course. One more question that we have. According to one of our audience members, recent polls were taken in Israel saying that the majority of Israelis or whoever reported in the poll are actually against this plan. How would that affect the execution of extending sovereignty?
This was a deceit. This was exposed by one of our best journalists that this was a deceit. Because it says, who's for, you know, there are all kinds of, the poll was about annexation, of course, which once you said that you use this term, of course, everybody's against it, it's illegal. Who is in favor of theft? Well, not many people. But even then, what they did was that those who said that they support the Trump plan, they counted them as if they are against annexation. And once you really look at, because they took those who are in favor of totally unilateral application of the law without the peace plan as the only people who are in favor of what they call annexation, which is of course nonsense. And in fact, the majority of the people in Israel, and this was seen, this issue was a major issue in the last elections. And this is seen in the way our Knesset is going to vote. It's if you add the coalition that also by itself has more than 70 seats in the Knesset. If you add to that the Lieberman and the Yamina and Bogi Ya'alon and others, I'm not sure that all Yesh Atid is going to vote against it. Then you will have maybe even more than 80. So this claim that the poll shows, first of all, it was received, it was exposed, they had to apologize. This was the commanders for so-called security of Israel. And they had to apologize and say, well, we made a mistake, we didn't understand. This journalist spoke with the people who carried out the poll, and they said, we never said that there was a majority against it, and so on and so forth. This was just another deceit.
Yeah, I just want to make one very quick point here. There is nothing in the, for those of us who have read the 181-page Trump plan, or 186-page US plan, there's nothing in the plan about unilateral action. And I think that Cooper has tried to make this point, and I try to make this point, that Israel's potential action on July 1st or in the weeks thereafter is in understanding in the application of this bilateral or hopefully trilateral plan, that thus far the Palestinians, as they have 9 times earlier since 1936, have said to Ambassador Friedman, you are a dog, I quote. And they said about Trump, you are a dog. And they said to Netanyahu, we will never deal with you, and they use worse language. So you're talking about a situation in which one side has said they have actually voided the Oslo agreement back in 2012 when they appealed to the UN against all past signed agreements and the Oslo Accords that they would not do that. So they've already voided the Oslo Accords. Israel is here in concert with the administration talking about applying Israeli law to areas that will only be part of of Israel in the future anyway. It is not encroaching or annexing or applying law to what anyone thinks will be part of the Palestinian state. So that is within the context of the Trump plan. So that's how to think about why how Israel is applying the law.
I want to clarify here. You cannot separate between the Trump plan and the presentation of the Trump plan by President Trump in this meeting in January. In that presentation, he spoke about this unilateral move if once the demarcation committee is going to finish its activity. So this is actually part of the plan. The presentation of the plan by the president is part of the plan, and this is why it is in accordance with the plan that we move unilaterally on this matter.
Wonderful. Okay, I'd like to just wrap it up by saying that it makes our work that much more important because we have got to communicate these points, not only to the Jewish community, but to our elected officials, many of which have had, since 1993, drummed into their head a false paradigm that has proved to be an abysmal failure. And do not understand the real realities of the nature of the beast that Israel has got to live with from day to day. I cannot thank both of you wonderful, illustrious gentlemen enough for what you have done and continue to do for the state of Israel and for the security of the Jewish people throughout the world. If there were no Jewish state, the rest of us would really be in peril. And so we all cannot thank you enough. And please tune in next week for another incredibly important webinar. We will be talking about the fact that there are only 4 months until the sanctions against Iran are going to actually expire. And we need, we need to discuss what's going to be done next. And we will be honored to have, among others, Shoshana Bryan, brilliant woman from the Jewish Policy Center, to discuss this. Another important, extremely important existential issue that the state of Israel and the rest of the world will have to deal with soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.